Good morning. Welcome back to the back room of my house. Um, as you can see, there are no sad beige vibes in here. We are going to move and leave the country, so we're not really much caring about the aesthetics of the house, except to get rid of all this clutter. Um, is a major goal. So sorry. I'm going to read from the second chapter of Strange Fire in a Vacuum. I'm doing this as part of a series. I will create a playlist. This was requested by one of my subscribers. I'm up to 22 now. I'm pleased. I'm pleased as pie. If I had a reading in Philadelphia and 22 people showed up, I would have been overjoyed. So this is really nice for me. And thank you all very much for subscribing. I hope that most of you are subscribing sincerely and in earnest and not just to spy on me because you might say something about my ex-husband. Anyhow, this is a short chapter. The rest of the chapters are much longer, meatier. They need to be broken up in terms of readings, but chapter 1 and chapter 2 are very basic, straightforward points. So I'm just taking my thesis, my 7-point thesis, and going at it chapter by chapter. Chapter 2. Mass shooters are men. This poses a challenge for an unprepared, biased mental health system. Okay, now I have to make a note. Since the publication of this book, there was a mass shooting that was perpetrated by a female who identified as a trans man. I'm not really going to get into the details of that or unpack that. I do not wish to be distracted by a conversation about a trans person, trans rights, or that political hot potato right now. Okay. The only consistent demographic feature of mass shooters is that they are almost all men. In my experience, women who have suffered trauma and who end up suicidal either go through with it or get help. They seldom act out and choose suicide by cop. They seldom physically wound or kill others in the process. According to the New York Times, quote, as convenient as it would be, there's no one-size-fits-all profile of who carries out mass shootings in the United States. About the only thing almost all of them have in common is that they are men. But those men come from varying backgrounds with different mental health diagnoses and criminal histories, unquote. This quote is used in a series of articles by Benjamin Radford, a scientific paranormal investigator and a research fellow at the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. Much of Radford's 3-part series is a debunking of bad media analysis of the mass shooter phenomenon. Radford thinks that both the scale and the specifics of mass shootings have been sensationalized by a media that does not hew to scientific and academic standards of objectivity. While I agree with Radford's critique of the way the media has handled the epidemic, I think he goes too far in the direction of boxing in and isolating the phenomenon as a scientific problem. His highly analytical approach to data sets and his abundance of caution when it comes to generalizations are antidotes to sloppy media coverage, but they also lead to a dire, straitjacketed prognosis which offers little hope or advice for stemming the violence. For example, in the second article in the series titled, Who Are Mass Shooters? Mass Shooter Demographics, Radford concludes, quote, any one of us could be killed at any moment by a mass shooter or serial killer, but the chances of it happening are so remote that it's pointless to worry about, and there's not much we can do to prevent it anyway, unquote. According to Radford, the media errs on the side of emotionalism and cheap partisan ballyhoo. I find his analysis of mass shooter demographics bracingly straight and apolitical, but I disagree with his dire resignation. I want to examine the phenomenon as it relates to other cultural trends. If the single most salient demographic criteria is that mass shooters are men, not women, that will be a starting point for analysis. After that, I tackle class issues and the surveillance state. If mass shooters are post-traumatic, full of rage and/or shame, then so too are many women who share their country and times. Women are just as likely, if not more likely, to suffer trauma as a result of domestic violence, abuse, and/or an attendant downward economic spiral. So what makes women not likely to commit these crimes? And what can we learn from the differences in the way that women and men process these painful catalytic life events and circumstances? These are questions worth asking. I should point out that the statement, if mass shooters are post-traumatic, is a hypothetical because many of them aren't. Okay, so I get more into that. How you can get a person who may have been through a very average life story to suddenly snap. So I'm going to examine other sorts of, I wouldn't call it pathologies because I believe it's socially induced. But again, I just want to caveat this whole paragraph that I just read. First of all, women are much more likely than men to seek the help of a therapist or to disclose mental health problems to a primary care physician than men. Differential rates of diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and other disorders in men and women have been noted by the World Health Organization. Quote, gender bias occurs in the treatment of psychological disorders. Doctors are more likely to diagnose depression in women compared with men, even when they have similar scores on standardized measures of depression or present with identical symptoms. Female gender is a significant predictor of being prescribed mood-altering psychotropic drugs. I just watched a video yesterday of Dr. Joseph Whitduring, and he quoted the statistic that 18% of American women are on antidepressants or some kind of psych med. 18%. However, I do not think that this alone accounts for the fact that men, not women, are mass shooters 100% of the time. I offer this disparity in treatment rates as one explanatory variable in a macro-level examination of the problem because it is one example of how men and women differ in cultural conditioning to begin with. I do not think that more mental health care will prevent mass shootings. If you want to see more of my opinions on the healthcare, quote-unquote, mental health care crisis in our country, or on mental health care in general, please see the rest of my channel, in particular my deconverting from Christianity videos and my rebel wellness videos. Okay. I do not think that we can or should equalize the rates of treatment among men and women. This is because I have a generally negative view of treatment and mental health care treatment and paradigms and the loaded, fraught language of mental health in this country. I do not think such an expansion of services will encompass and neutralize potential mass shooters, although it might lead to a decline in the number of suicides. The non-emergence and non-detection of mass shooters within our nation's healthcare system is primarily due to the fact that the system is designed to detect treatable mental illness, not preemptively flag individuals prone to criminal behavior. Embedded in these differential rates of treatment are differing expectations for men and women in our society. We expect women to submit to treatment, and inherent in this expectation is an assumption that the root causes for the depression and anxiety are internal. It's a hyper-individualized paradigm that we're currently unpacking and exploding in the psychiatric survivor movement. They need a pill to alter their internal environment. They need to adjust their physiology to cope with or meet their external reality, not necessarily examine or alter external reality. We expect men reporting the same levels of depression to forego the same treatment, perhaps because we are more likely to attribute these feelings in men to external circumstances. to events and conditions in their lives that they may or may not exercise control over. The ignorance of male suffering in treating physicians sort of legitimates a grievance mentality rather than an organic disease model. I don't necessarily agree with either. Okay. If a woman is depressed, she needs help from an expert bureaucratic class. She is somehow not whole. If a man is depressed, he is unhappy and needs to fix the problems in his life. He need not necessarily defer to the authority or suffer the interventions of this same expert bureaucratic class. It bears pointing out that when it comes to existential despair, a state which is much deeper than depression or anxiety, and which has its root causes in a decaying social fabric, neither approach is entirely realistic or correct. It also bears pointing out that with respect to other forms of mental disorder, differential rates of treatment may not skew so heavily along gender lines. Beginning in the early 2000s, scores of young boys and male teenagers were captured by an ADHD diagnostic criterion that seems to me to have been very heavy handed in coding much stereotypically masculine defiant behavior as aberrant and pathological. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Instant Kiwi 1005, for your suggestion. I think this is going to work out very well.